and welcome to our fifth and final Branding on a Budget, which is bittersweet. We are so thankful that you have all joined us. Even though today is the fifth and final one, we do have all of them available on United Way's website, along with a resource list that Stacy has cultivated and shared with us. So that's definitely worth looking at. And that's just at unitedwayofnorthernutah.org. And you can go under nonprofits, webinars, and events, and you will find the Branding on a Budget information. Today we are going to be joined by Clarice Miljor, who is Goal Foundation's Operations Manager. And if you've never heard of Goal Foundation, they are a huge nonprofit downtown Ogden, and they run the Ogden Marathon, which is huge, and they bring in so many people to the community, and they also manage so many volunteers that when we decided to do this training on inspiring community advocates, the first person that came to our minds was Clarice. So we're very excited that she's going to be joining us today. The first thing we wanted to talk to you about is recruiting volunteers. So the first thing to think about when you're talking about recruiting volunteers is how to connect your community members with your organization's mission. So we've talked a lot in past trainings about your organization's why, how to make sure that your why statement is really circling back to everything that your organization is hoping to achieve, and what opportunities are available to be involved, and what that impact will be. So making sure that you really have a good handle of that, and you're sharing that with members of the community, and those that are interested oftentimes will come to you if they've heard about your organization and they're interested. The next thing you want to do is really talk with members of the community or people that are interested or may potentially be interested in volunteering with your organization. Talk about them and what they're passionate about. So I'm not necessarily the most outdoorsy person in the world, but when I was talking to Clarice, she was able to sell Goal Foundation to me by offering the ways in which I would feel more connected. So she talked to me about the impact on volunteers. She told me that they have a youth program that they run, and I am very passionate about working with youth. And so that's something that I was able to then in turn go and do is volunteer with the youth programs at Goal Foundation. And so making sure that you're really talking to people and seeing what they're interested in, and then making that connection to your own programming and sharing that with them.
And when you've decided that you need volunteers and you want to take those steps to then recruit volunteers, it's really important to have a plan. You might notice a common theme in these trainings. We're always talking about having plans. It's important to really make sure that you know what your needs are so that you can best fill those volunteer positions to serve your organization, but then also in turn to really benefit the volunteers' time and to be respectful of that time. So make sure that you are identifying what you need as an organization and really how many individuals you need. Sometimes you might need 1 or 2 people, sometimes you might need 50 to 500 people. You really never know. I think a lot of times people hear the word volunteer opportunity and they automatically think soup kitchen or picking up garbage on the side of the road, but it really could be anything from filing papers to inputting data into a spreadsheet to being out on the street and cleaning up trails or things like that. It really could be a wide variety of skill sets. So just making sure that you know where you can plug volunteers into your organization, and really also honing in on what volunteers will learn during their experience with you. How could someone utilize this volunteer opportunity on their resume or on a college application if they're in high school, or if they're going on to pursue a master's or a PhD, things like that. How could this work be relevant to multiple areas of focus? And then once you know what you need, how many people you need, things like that, how are you going to get these volunteers and what avenues will you use to then start recruiting? And there are some organizations in the community like the Junior League of Ogden, Rotary, places like that that have groups of people already assembled that are looking to do things together, that are willing to volunteer. That's kind of their mission, their vision. That's why they joined these groups. So it's good to tap into those, because here's a database of people that you already know have the heart and the passion to serve and give back to the community. But when you are reaching out to these groups, just make sure that your ask is very specific and that you know how many people you need, what exactly you want them to do, when, what the goal is, just so that, again, you're being mindful of everyone's time.
That's a great point. Women in Business, Junior League of Ogden, Rotary, those organizations are so helpful. They're already together and ready to volunteer. But another thing to consider is interest-based businesses and larger corporations too, because those larger corporations have enough people and they have necessarily maybe more specified skill base to be able to do different volunteer tasks. Like Intermountain Healthcare, if you're doing something with promoting health and education, you could reach out to them and see if that's a project that their staff could volunteer and help out with, because a lot of those times they are looking to fulfill so many volunteer hours a year. When you're looking to post your volunteer opportunities, there's a lot of different avenues you can use. Obviously, the most commonly used would be social media. But where do you post in social media? Like, not just sharing on your page, but sharing to interest-based groups on social media or other organizations that are similar, or it might have a volunteer base that might also be interested. So places like Weber State University, Utah Nonprofit Alliance, the Chamber of Commerce, UServe, the United Way has a newsletter that goes out once a month, which is awesome and has a bunch of information for nonprofits and volunteers that are interested. Goal Foundation has, like we said before, tons of volunteers, so they have a very large email base you could be reaching out to. Another thing that a lot of organizations find themselves doing, especially smaller organizations, is tabling. Tabling is a lot of fun, but it can be a lot of work. So make it fun. Have a good time with it. Have music. Make sure you've got swag to give away. Have an eye-catching, vibrant display, and have an interactive activity where you can engage people that stop by. Have something that's happening at your booth that's fun and people want to come over and be a part of, and they're curious and they're like, ooh, what's that? I want to go find out. Don't just do like cornhole, which a lot of booths do cornhole. Cornhole's great, but they might have already played it at 3 other booths in the area. So try to think of something that's creative and different and actually reflects your organization. Mm-hmm. Or you can have a sign-up sheet. Sometimes a lot of people like to have a hard copy. I know I'm one of those people. I still like hard copies for people to sign up. And then, they're doing it there and then leaving kind of thing. They don't forget about it later. So that's always something to think about, having like a sign-up sheet for people right there. But also make sure that you have a few specific things in mind that you're going to ask. We need specifically 10 people to sign up for this trail cleaning day. And this is what your tasks will be. These are the skills you will need or you won't need, kind of thing. Okay, we need 50 people for this, but we're doing in pairs of 2, so bring a friend. Or, have those actual opportunities ready to go, and don't have it just be open, because then people are less likely to sign up and they're less likely to be feel connected, Make sure you're displaying photos or stories or videos or anything that you can share about participants of your organization's work and how they were impacted, what was exciting about it. Going back to those statistics I said at the beginning, have some of those displayed, and then, just have fun. Just have fun with it. People can feel that energy and they're gonna gravitate towards those more exciting tables. Another way you can highlight your organization's mission is by identifying your 3330 elevator pitch deck, and that's your 30-second, your 3-minute, and your 30-minute quick elevator pitch about why people should join your organization. So for example, if I'm giving a presentation, it's going to be that 30-minute. If I'm going to a tabling event, it's going to be the 30 seconds or the 3-minute, depending on the person, And so being able to have those down and kind of practice them, remember them, it'll make you feel more comfortable once you're in those positions. Identify places you can go based on interest and what your needs are for your organization. For example, if you need a big mural drawn on the side of your building, go to the Nine Rails Creative District and go to an event that's maybe happening down there. And that's gonna be a place where you're gonna find those artists that can do that for your organization. So kind of being mindful about where your organization is present for the specific need you're looking to fill. Just a few ideas for events and happenings locally that you could get involved in. Weber State University often has a lot of events on campus, and I don't know, this year with everything going on, but they have a volunteer fair every year, which would be awesome to get into, and you can get into that by just talking with the Center for Community Engaged Learning. Indy Ogden has a bazaar at the Monarch. Ogden Downtown Alliance obviously does Farmers Market, Harvest Moon, a lot of big events. So that's always a great one to get more information about.
So once you have your volunteers recruited and they're showing up on site, ready to do the work, how are you going to manage those volunteers? What information are you getting from them to then contact them after they volunteer, things like that. So there are a couple different volunteer management programs that you can use. Google Sheets, honestly, is just very easy. Excel spreadsheets, very easy, simple to use. But then there's also Sign Up Genius or Get Connected. Those are just some examples. Again, most of these are either free or they even have nonprofit rates, or they're free for nonprofits. So look into that. But what information are you keeping from your volunteers? Obviously, you should keep their name and then their contact information, preferably an email address, because that's an easy way to send them like follow-up surveys or additional volunteer opportunities, or get more information from them, things like that. But then it's also nice to have a phone number for your volunteers as well, especially if you're working on a larger site or at multiple sites, or if you need something really quick and on the spot. That's just a nice way to be able to get in contact with people, and it's a tad more personal. So those would be my top 3 things that you definitely want to include. And then if you want to make any additional notes, maybe you got talking to them and they said that they had a special interest in youth programming or in trail cleanup, and they're very passionate about the environment, things like that. Maybe make those notes so as you move forward, you remember who really liked what, and then you can pull from those specialized segments as well. And next, you really want to turn your volunteers into advocates for your organization. And Clarice does talk more about this in her interview, because that is something that Goal has done a fantastic job at. And so we're just, I loved hearing from her about that, and you will too. But do your volunteers know who you are and what you do? And are they buying like why you do it? Are they buying your why statement? Do they know your vision? Do they know your mission? All of those things. If you have like a DEI statement like we talked about in our last training, do they know about that? Do they know what that is? Are they connected to these pieces that make up your organization? And I think this all comes back to really your brand. Like, do the people who are volunteering for you know your brand, and are they buying into it? Because that will really make them be your advocates moving forward.
And once you've got them as a volunteer, the onboarding process is actually really important. So if it's a big group, then you want to make sure you're getting them together at the beginning of the project, and you're making sure that they get the full shebang. They get all of the information, they know what they're doing, they don't feel lost or confused. They know up front what is their role, what is their individual role, and what is the role and the goal of the group at large. If you are having a volunteer come onto your team that is going to be with your team for a while, such as like a volunteer intern or somebody who wants to volunteer ongoing with a specific program, you really want to make sure that that's a little bit more personal of an experience. So setting a one-on-one meeting, if you have the time available, is great. Or you can do this in small groups if you have multiple. But give them a tour of your facility, of your programming. Find out, this is a great time to find out what the volunteer wants to get out of the experience. What do they want to learn? What are they passionate about? What made them want to come volunteer with you? How can you exceed their expectations? Why did they choose to be a volunteer with your specific organization? What excites them about that? After you're done with that brief onboarding experience, make sure that you are surveying them and find out if it was a good experience for them, and then you can use that information for future, because I think that's something that a lot of organizations have a hard time with, is the onboarding process, and really trying to figure out, like, do my volunteers feel secure? Do they feel knowledgeable? Do they feel like they are making an impact? And so having that survey kind of at the beginning, and then you can do that at the end, which we'll talk about again in a second. But something I would suggest is actually making a training manual, or even just something as simple as a small plan for each available volunteer opportunity that you have, because this is going to streamline the volunteer onboarding process so much better. You'll make sure you're not forgetting anything, and then if you're not available, somebody else can do it for you, or they can self-educate on the position, but they still have those materials available, and that's so important.
Another really important piece of volunteer management is really clear communication. And I feel like this is something that I feel most of us that have volunteered, we've been in situations where you've had amazing communication with your site leader or your director, organizer, group leader, whatever you want to call it. And then we've had experiences where we had no idea what we were supposed to be doing or where we needed to be, and it just kind of got chaotic. So really making sure that your volunteers know what time they need to be somewhere, where, what exactly they're going to be doing, what skills they will be building or utilizing, things like that. So they just really know what they're getting into, and just making sure that they are as informed and organized as possible. And if this means that you have the most detailed agenda, like from 8 to 8:05, we're gonna do donuts, and then from 8:05 to 8:20, we're stuffing binders. Like, if you need that, then that is great, because it will keep people on task and on time. I'm one of those people where I just like to schedule things out so I kind of know what's coming and how much time I have allotted for different activities and different volunteer things. So definitely something to keep in mind. And also something that we mentioned earlier, but kind of just circling back to that, the skill building aspect of volunteer opportunities, and really put yourself in their shoes. Like, what real world experience, as people call it, can someone gain from volunteering with your organization? How can they use this if they're applying for a job, if they're applying for an internship, for college, for graduate school, et cetera, et cetera? Like, how could this become a resume builder or just a personal growth opportunity for someone? And then once you have your volunteers there and you're working with them, you're communicating with them, just making sure that you're keeping them engaged after the fact, in that you are encouraging that ownership and leadership while they're there. Maybe you're making certain people leaders, or you kind of have like group leaders or this or that, or you give them specific tasks to do. And Clarice also talks about this in her interview. Hers is more so pertaining to the Ogden Marathon, but it's a fabulous example. So maybe there's opportunities for that kind of ownership and leadership there. But then after, once they've left, are there other volunteer highlights that you're doing? And it comes back to what Danielle was saying about using social media. Are you highlighting your volunteers? Of course, if they're comfortable with having their picture and their information out there. Are you showcasing them? Are you spotlighting them? Are you showcasing the amount of hours that people have put into your organization and getting other community members excited? I think if they see that you value the people that are working with you, and if you're investing in your people, then they will invest back in you. And I think that is really important as well.
It's so important to remember that these are volunteers. And I think that sometimes that does get a little bit taken for granted in some organizations, just because, especially when you're managing so many volunteers, but if you have a few that are like very, very engaged, no matter how, how little or how much time, it's still their time that they are choosing to deliberately spend with your organization. And so not only just making them feel like they're getting something out of it, but also making them feel seen and heard and acknowledged and really appreciated, which is great for retaining volunteers. Something that's extremely important with your volunteers is making them feel appreciated. And it can be something as simple as a handwritten thank you card, an email. Try to personalize it. If you work with kids, for example, if it's Boys and Girls Club and you have somebody that's been volunteering with your program, have one of the kids draw them a little picture and say thank you. Or if you have a volunteer at the YCC Women's Shelter, have one of the women write a letter about why it mattered to them that you were willing to take some time out of your day to help and volunteer with this organization. Luncheons and gatherings are great. If you have a lot of volunteers, then it is nice to do kind of a group activity now that is more available to us. People are really loving that. So if you have a group, for example, that helped out from Weber State University, then what are you going to do for them? Are you going to buy a bunch of hats, or could you just hold like a picnic at the park and then have it catered and have them all come and then do like a little presentation about how they made an impact, why you loved having them there, and then just have it be a fun time. If it's a lot of volunteers, like Haley said before, include the families. Let them know that they can bring their family and do a dinner or a potluck or a gathering, and just something that you're hosting for volunteers so that they feel like they are essentially like a small community. And it also is a great opportunity for them to network with other volunteers and possibly make friends that they're going to bring to their next volunteer opportunity with your organization. You can do acknowledgement in other ways. I know Haley already kind of mentioned doing some social media shout outs. That's such a fun way to promote your organization, your volunteer opportunities, and highlight different volunteers in your community. This person accomplished this today. We're so thankful for them for that. And then you're tagging them, and you're also reaching their, more likely they're going to share it, then it's going to reach their friend base. And then you're getting more visibility again for your organization. Doing volunteer highlights in a newsletter. Also, awards. Who's the number one volunteer for hours? Which volunteer gave the most hours to your organization this year? Something like that, like making it fun. And these are again awards that you can do at those gatherings or those luncheons if you choose to.
So once everything has happened, just making sure that you are leaving your volunteers with additional opportunities to get involved so that you can retain them and they will keep coming back. And if you were with us a couple weeks ago when we had Allison, she talked about something slightly similar, not really, but I'm gonna make it work. When you're hosting media, to always have another story ready to pitch. Well, this is kind of the same situation when you're hosting volunteers, have another opportunity ready to pitch to them. So as you're talking to them, as you're cleaning up and you're like, oh, did you have fun today? And they're like, yeah, I really liked this. Great, I'm glad that you liked that. We're doing it again in X days, X weeks, whatever. If you can make it, we would love to have you. Again, my name is so-and-so, great to meet you. Those kinds of personal connections and remembering that type of information really goes a long way with people. And like Danielle mentioned, just always know how to stay in touch with them. Are you doing newsletters? Are you doing social media groups, little get-togethers, things like that? Just making sure that you have that plan, that you can loop them in on that. And with that, we've come to the end of our final training on the theme of recognition and acknowledgement. Since we are at the end, at the beginning of this Branding on a Budget series, we mentioned certificates for people who watched all 5 of our trainings. And so that time has come. So following this training, we'll be sending out our final follow-up survey, and if you click into that survey, there will be an option for you to request your certificate if you participated in and attended all 5 of those trainings. You can list what email you want it sent to, your name or your organization's name, whoever you're doing it on behalf of, if that's not yourself, all of that. And then once you request that, then you will receive that. So now we are going to transition into our pre-recorded interview with Clarice, and she has a lot of knowledge and examples and just fun things to share with the group. And then after that, she will be on for our live Q&A. So if you have any questions that you thought of during our training portion, or if you think of any additional questions during the pre-recorded interview, just make sure you put those in the chat box below, and then we will see you all at the live Q&A.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for joining us. We are live from our own homes, and we're joined by Clarice, who is the operations manager at Goal Foundation. We're very excited to have her here. She's a close friend and an incredible networker. She's always connecting people downtown, and we love that about her. So thank you, Clarice, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
First, can you tell us a little bit more about Goal Foundation and what Goal Foundation does?
Yes, I would love to. So GOAL, G-O-A-L, a lot of people don't know, it is an acronym for Get Out and Live. So I work for the Get Out and Live Foundation. I absolutely love it. We produce athletic events and we provide volunteer support for national athletic events who come through Weber County. And we also have programming where we provide like a give back to our community. And the programming that we choose to offer is geared towards youth. And so we partner with the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club, and we make good things happen for kids, and we get them active, whether it's through running or doing obstacle courses, and providing opportunities to earn an entry into some of our events like the Ogden Marathon, and also to provide exposure to experiences they may not have had the opportunity to do. And so whether that's through scholarships or just getting people plugged in, that's kind of in a nutshell what Goal Foundation does.
Let's talk a little bit more about you specifically. So how long have you been at Goal, and what do you love about it most?
Well, so I've been at Goal, oh my goodness, It'll be 8 years in November.
Oh,
I'll
wow.
have been at Goal. When I was hired, it was just solely like to manage the volunteer program, which I'd love to tell you more about that here as we continue this conversation. But and as you know, each event happens and the years went on, I took on the role of the operations manager, and I've been doing that since 2017. And as the operations manager, I'm in charge of lots of details and logistics. And when we produce our athletic events, it's all about getting people, you know, from point A to point B safely. And there's a lot of in between, whether it's signage or permits or law enforcement that we're working with, or 1,000 volunteers. And so those are the details that I get to be in charge of. And I love it. And you asked, why do I love it? And I think it's because, you know, I live in Ogden, I work in Ogden, and I play in Ogden. And it's just, I get so excited to tell people about all the exciting things that are happening. And there's something to do literally every weekend. And with my job, I get to not only know about it, but I get to tell other people about it. And when people come together and they feel that ownership and they feel a part of the community, is where that pride comes in. And I think if anyone's been to Ogden or been involved, there's a lot of Ogden pride.
I love the piece about it being different every day. I feel like that's true for so many nonprofits and so many organizations downtown. And you mentioned the volunteer structure of Goal, and we kind of want to dive more into that now. So could you kind of explain what that looks like and maybe how many volunteers you would say you have average yearly?
Yeah, you bet. So I'm going to tell you a little story first about Goal Foundation. And a lot of people may not know this. And we were actually founded on the coattails of the Winter Olympics. So when the Olympics came here back in 2002, we had these amazing people, these visionaries in our community who were thinking like, oh, wow, like we're going to have the Olympics come. How do we harness that spirit and that energy? So once the Olympics have come and gone, we're not just a town that once had the Olympics, but we are able to capture that spirit and keep it alive. And so you had this group of people who, you know, they vision cast and they didn't know what it was going to look like, but they knew they wanted to be a part of something big and keep it in their community. And so here we are. I feel like that's important for you to know, just so you kind of understand what Goal Foundation is, kind of how we started and what our core is. And we started on volunteerism, and our core of our foundation, our backbone of all of our events are our volunteers. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot that goes with that. And so the way we have our volunteer structure set up, we have kind of 3 different departments, I guess you could say. But we have our volunteers who come when we have opportunities that are usually like a single day, just, you know, whether it's 4 hours or 8 hours, they kind of come. They don't have to do a lot of training or anything ahead of time. They can just show up. And then we have our board. We have our board of directors, and they're there to kind of help guide us and make strategic decisions and just help provide insight. And they're busy, and it's a dedicated team, and they put many, many years of their life into our organization, and we're so thankful for that. And then we have what we call an events team, and that's where we have a whole team of people. There's about 40, and each of them are in charge of like a lead area. And so depending on what the event is, there'll be different team members, but those team members are more dedicated, and we kind of think of them as an extension of our staff. And so when we are preparing for events, they have a little bit more responsibility, and they help us manage groups of volunteers in their area.
How many volunteers do you think that you have, like on average, year to year?
Well, I can actually tell you exactly how many volunteers we had. So in 2019, I'm going to tell you 2019 because we all know what happened in 2020, and it was an event. So in 2019, are you ready? Do you have a drum roll? Can we get one? So I just feel so proud of our community. We had 4,187 volunteers in 12 months in 2019, and that equaled 36,085 hours. And wow. At that time, the average hour was considered the value of a volunteer hour was considered to be $27.20. It's even more now, but at that time, that is $981,000, like almost $1 million of time that our community donated. An average of what we'd have on just a normal year is about 2,000. So still an impressive number.
So I know Goal Foundation has a really great appreciation process for their volunteers, and it seems like you guys put a lot of thought into it. I know from my personal experiences for the viewers, whenever I've volunteered with Goal, I end up leaving with like a belly full of burrito or like a brand new beanie that says Goal Foundation on it, or a shirt, or like some fun swag. And I know that you offer dinners and stuff, but I'm not sure exactly like all of the appreciation tactics. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how your team shows volunteer appreciation. And then if you could talk about some of the ideas that were the most well received.
So the way that we like to show our appreciation to our volunteers, of course, like we always like to feed our volunteers. We like to offer a shirt or some type of swag item. That's always great. But what it really comes down to is investing time in our volunteers. And even if it's just like, maybe if you don't have time to get to know and take the time with each volunteer, like even if you just have time for like one or two, but just first of all, I think taking the time to foster those relationships. And it could be as simple as just saying, hey, I really want to take your picture. And then from there, just being like, can I get your name? Like, do you have a Facebook? Do you have an Instagram? And just like making that little effort to just like recognize that they've shown up and to connect with them through social media. Or if they don't have a social media, maybe you email them the picture. And I think a lot of times, like it's really, especially in the nonprofit world, it's really easy to think the way to reward or to appreciate somebody is by giving them something, which we often don't have a budget for. That stuff's expensive. And so I think it's so important to know it's not, you can recognize and appreciate somebody in so many ways that are free. And some of the things that we have done is recognize like your volunteers' accomplishments. So let's say you have an intern, a past intern, or somebody who, they're at a different chapter in their life and they decided, to go and join the Peace Corps. Well, where do you have an opportunity to mention that? And so if you're putting out a newsletter or if you have an end of the year report, have a section where you just talk about your volunteers and highlight those stories. Just a simple little write-up about somebody and publicly posting that, it goes a long way. And also like just thanking them publicly, if you're at an event or whatever it might be and you're on the mic, while you're thanking those sponsors, thank your volunteers. And if you have a moment to highlight a couple in particular, like just take that moment and it'll go further than I think anyone really realizes. One of the things that we do at Goal Foundation to just show some appreciation to our volunteers is we throw a big volunteer party each year. And everyone who's volunteered with us at any event in the last year, they're invited to come and they get to bring their families. And we rent out the front climbing club. We have some caterers come in, we have some face painters. The kids get to climb on all the climbing walls. The parents get to visit with the other parents. And it's just a really simple thing. It's about 2 hours long, but our volunteers love it and they look forward to it every year. And then it also gives us an opportunity to talk to our community partners and let them know what we're doing. And we're always so surprised at the generosity where people are like, oh, we'd love to provide this for your volunteer party, or, oh, we'd love to, and people are just so generous in donating to help us make those parties extra special. Another thing I want to mention about just showing appreciation to your volunteers, not only is it the right thing to do is to appreciate those who help you and to show your gratitude, but it really, in the long run, it helps, I think, it helps your volunteers to be engaged with your organization and to feel that same passion.
And this next question might kind of be in line with the appreciation piece, but for those people who might be on this call, obviously, the majority of people are from nonprofits or local small businesses, so they might have a smaller volunteer base than like Goal Foundation has. So for those people who have minimal volunteers but are looking to increase their recruitment and to get more volunteers, can you maybe share some like just beginner level like baseline tips for making those asks to the community and kind of encouraging those volunteers to come out?
When you begin to think about recruiting volunteers, I think like something that is really healthy to do, like I think all of us are always thinking like we need more, like we need more volunteers. But I think like the first step is to really take time and identify why do you need volunteers? What will they be doing? And then depending on that, like knowing your audience. So let's say you need volunteers on Monday through Friday in the middle of the day. Well, who's available on Monday through Friday, middle of the day? Maybe retired people. You need people to come, and have a lot of energy and cheer people on. Who's great at that? Kids. How can we get kids and their family to come out? And I think if you just can first identify like where you need volunteers and then think about the time of day or time of year, and who's available, and that'll change like with each season. So I think knowing that about your organization is somewhere a great place to start. And then also I think the best way to get volunteers is to tell them a story. Tell them why you need them and make them feel like they can actually bring something to the table and that you need them for this to be successful. And also not only why you need them, but how will it benefit them? And especially like the future of the workforce, having volunteer experience, it's necessary. Like it's everybody talks about like getting that degree and getting extra trainings and and all of that's great, but also volunteering, like that's something, it's something we should all have as part of our lifestyle.
I don't know if you mentioned this already, but where do you all as Goal Foundation recruit mostly? Like, do you put your volunteer listings on like Facebook, or do you use your website, or are there other like platforms out there where you can kind of put that call out? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so we do all of those. So we have all year long, we have a place on our website that prompts people when they visit to join our mailing list to stay in the loop, whether that's about volunteer opportunities or athletic opportunities. And then we also have a monthly newsletter. And now that we've been doing this for a couple decades, we have a pretty robust database. And we just try to be really respectful of what we are mailing to those people, not to send too many emails, but also not too little. And we just try to make our messaging like really clear and concise. And we never, share our emails with people. And we make sure our reputation as far as having that private information is, people know that we're respecting that. And then we also use social media, and depending on what the event is and how many volunteers, we might put some Facebook ad dollars or paid ads. And I think all three of those are a great place to work together, and they kind of integrate and work really well. A new platform that we've recently adopted, it's called GivePulse. And we heard about it from Weber State University. They've also just adopted it, and it's really neat because not only is it a volunteer management platform, but it's a place for anyone who's looking to volunteer in their community to go and not just see my organization's opportunities, but everyone else in the community. And so it's kind of like a one-stop shop. Kind of, I think, just all those things you mentioned: website, social media, newsletter, and then the management platform, like just using all of those together and seeing what makes sense to put what messaging where.
Once a volunteer volunteers with Goal Foundation, how do you like get them to stay and come back? And how is the process of transitioning them into like an advocate for your organization so that they in turn go out and say, hey guys, like come volunteer for Goal Foundation?
I think first and foremost, like everybody likes to feel like they're in the loop and feel like they're being set up for success. So I think communication, like right off the bat, is really important to your reputation. Everybody likes to know when they need to be there, where they need to go, do they need to dress warm, are they gonna have food? Just all of those little things that seem so basic, they really are setting the foundation to build that relationship on. And so I think with that first impression, if you can make people feel like they know what they're doing, that their time is being valued and respected, and then afterwards, they're going to be interested in finding out about the next opportunity. And so you just kind of keep building and fostering those relationships, just like we all do with whether it's sponsorships or just in our own personal lives or professional. It's just all about those relationships and those connections. And then as you see those people like coming back and you get to know them, and you can always invite them, like, would you like to be more involved, and kind of just spill them out and find out what their passion is. Is it, helping with like more with the youth, or, are they an athlete themselves and they have some valuable insight that they can provide to your events? And I think also just like meeting people where they're at. And if you have set hours and we only allow volunteers from this time to this time, well, you really are kind of excluding a whole potential group of people that you may not even know what they could bring to your organization.
I know back when I was a student at Weber, I was very involved with the Center for Community Engaged Learning, and we did a lot of volunteer recruitment and then work volunteering ourselves. And I know sometimes an organization will know that they need help and they know that they need volunteers, but then once 20 people show up, they suddenly don't know what to have you do. And so sometimes there's like 4 people working and then a bunch of people off to the side, or vice versa. And so what kind of like ownership opportunities are available at the Goal Foundation for people to kind of have as volunteers, like either on the events team or maybe like water station leads at different races? Like, what are some ownership opportunities that you give people so that everyone can feel like they're making a contribution to the event that they're volunteering at?
One of the ways that we're able to create leadership opportunities for our volunteers, and a lot of times they don't even realize it when it's happening, is with our water stations. So for example, at the Ogden Marathon, we have, 26-mile course, and along there we have 16 water stations. Each of those water stations needs dozens of volunteers, and they have to be up early on a weekend, rain or shine, and they need a rocket because our runners need them like to finish this race. And so when you think about it, like as an event producer, oh my gosh, we need 1,000 volunteers and they all have to show up. Like, how is this ever going to happen? And so what we found to be so successful is we have each water station has a captain, and each captain is in charge of those volunteers for their water station. And so what is kind of evolved is we have a lot of local businesses and they each own that water station. And so rather than me having to try to facilitate and communicate with 1,000 water station volunteers, I only need to do it with 16. And then I set each of them up for success to make their water station the best water station. It's just like a win-win for both of us. And so it's just been so great. And we have a competition between each of the water stations for the best water station. I think they're all the best, but they have a competition, and then we survey all of our athletes afterwards and just say, which water station did you find to be the most memorable or really left an impression? And then at our volunteer appreciation party, we give out a big award. It's like a big trophy that they get to keep and has their name on it. And it just is like kind of a traveling trophy that who wins the following year will get to keep. And so it's been something that was just, it seems so simple, but for what we're able to accomplish with those key people, it's huge and it's big. And there's something else I just want to say, and if you feel like it's applicable, please put it anywhere. But I just want to ask people, like, have you ever had a passion but not an opportunity? And I think so many of us, like, we want to get involved and we do have a passion about something, but it's overwhelming to think, like, where do you even start, And so I think it's just so important to help create those opportunities, and to embrace our volunteers and to encourage their ideas, and to share not only your passion about your organization or what you're involved with, but like find out what their passion is, because passion is contagious and it sparks excitement.
With having 2,000 volunteers yearly, how would you say that you manage them and keep up with them? And I know you already kind of talked about that new platform you guys are working on, but do you have any other like suggestions for people to use to help manage their volunteers, especially with that many?
Yeah. So I think finding a platform that works for you is like just like pretty basic. And whether you have a budget to pay like a subscription, or if it's as simple as using a spreadsheet, I think it's just so important to be organized. And if you're not the best person at knowing how to do that, find someone who is. And it's all about being organized and having somewhere where you're storing people's names, numbers, emails, even some notes. But I think it's something that you don't want to put on the back burner. It's really easy to do. But there's lots of platforms out there. There's lots of free platforms out there, and there's also lots you can pay for. And I think just depending on what your needs are, for us, we manage thousands of volunteers a year. And so we need a pretty robust system to help keep track of hours and post multiple jobs. And but there was a time, several years ago where we used something that was a lot less robust. And I think you just need to always kind of evaluate where you're at and what's working. And as you grow, is that still working? And I just think I think with every organization, it's going to be something different.
Yeah, that's a good point. It definitely will vary
Yeah.
from organization to organization, as they're so different in mission and size and everything
Yeah.
else. But well, we made it to the end. So do you have any final thoughts or additional pieces of advice or tips for anyone who's watching right now?
Yes, I do. I think if I could just have any words of advice to myself included, but really just show up. Showing up is where it starts. Just show up. If you want to get involved, show up. And that can be in so many ways. It could be a phone call. It could be a Facebook message asking, how do I get involved? But if you have that little voice in your head and tapping, that tap, hey, let's get involved, or you're admiring people who are involved, take that step and just show up. And it just has to be one little step forward, and the domino effect or the ripple effect that can happen after that will blow you away. And one thing I absolutely love about our Ogden community is how easy it is to get involved. And I love how open arms people are. And once you start saying yes, you better learn to say no, because you're going to have a lot, that's just what I love about our community. It's not about, I've been here longer, and I've never felt like it's this totem pole where you have to earn your way to be able to have some type of ownership in whatever area of interest. But Ogden is awesome, and it is easy to get involved. And I just say, do it. Just get involved and show up.
Thank you again so much for joining us, Clarice, and we've loved getting to hear what you have to say. And for those of you watching right now, this is your final chance to throw any questions for our live Q&A in the chat box below, and Clarice will be joining us for that. So stay on for any additional questions that you have for her, and we will see you soon.